Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Reclaiming Soul Work podcast. We are reclaiming the sacred in soul work for healers, counselors, practitioners, and social workers, one episode at a time. My name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns, and I am one half of our podcast and really excited to be here with you all today to continue our conversation about what are we unlearning from our social work programs. Um, we like to welcome you all to our newest season, season two, where we are again focusing on unlearning. And today's episode, again, are the things that we've unlearned in social work. So let's get ready for an enlightening and humbling conversation.
There is a phone ringing in the background. Wow. Mercury is not playing today with me, and I cannot reach the phone. Welcome, everybody. um, okay, cool. Welcome, y'all. Welcome. Reclaiming Soul Work is a heart centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, identity, ancestral connections through the lens of tarot, divination, mysticism, mental health, and everything in between. My name is Biany. I use she or they pronouns, and I am a Black Latinx spiritual social worker, writer, tarot nerd, mama of three, and I actually wanted to share. Oh, before I share a little like kind of thing I'm kind of doing these days, but I live in what is presently known as Philadelphia, and I um, I come from fierce matriarchs who were born and raised in Dominican Republic, and I'm thinking a lot about them as we get ready for October and Samhain and things like that. So that feels really alive these days, thinking about my matriarchs who raised me. Um, and then just thinking of this season astrologically, y'all. I don't know if y'all are feeling it, but Sequoia and I were talking offline about how all these planets who are like our retrograde are just really at least weighing on me, really weighing heavily, inviting me to slow down and kind of bring in some ease and not plan out my whole days right now. Um, I wanted to share like a favorite meme, um, that I kind of not favorite, but one that's making me chuckle and it feels connected to this episode. And when Sequoia gets to introduce herself, she could share what's kind of up for her these days. But I've been like really comforted by meme therapy lately. And one of the ones that I discovered was this meme with Keanu Reeves, like in Matrix. And somebody wrote, when someone tries to tell me that I need to be a certain way in order to be a social worker. And Keanu Reeves is like, no, I don't think I will. It's in our Instagram if you want to see it. I put it in the stories. But it had me thinking a lot about, just the theme of today and how there are a lot of ways that we're told how to social work. A lot of our training and schooling to me has felt like, here are all the ways that you're supposed to social work. And so that meme was kind of funny because that image of him in the Matrix is like, and it's actually the recent Matrix, the one that probably wasn't as successful, but I thought it was a good film. So yeah, that's where I'm at. How about you, Sequoia?
I greatly appreciate that. Um, I love memes. I think that they are at times very underrated, for how much joy and like joy in the sense of a very easy way to like shift, your mood. Especially if it's like a funny one or even like a cat one. I love cat memes, or something cute. Anyway, because clearly I'll go on a tangent about that. Um, Thank you for, the offer to kind of hop in here about introductions. Again, my name is Sequoia and I use she and her pronouns. And I wear a few different hats, very similar to Biani. I am a therapist and an artist and a business owner. I'm a caregiver as well and an auntie. And I live in Anchorage on Dena'ina land. Let's see. I will share today. What am I in the mood for? Um, I was trying to think of like a movie. Because I feel like I've been watching a lot of movies right now. I really enjoy, I guess I'll just share. I really enjoy the Halloween season. A friend of mine was asking me, like, do I like going to haunted houses and things like that? And I told her, absolutely not. Like, I can't take things like that anymore. When I was younger, and it's not like too far up there in age, but I just it's certain things that I just can't my nerves won't let me tolerate, and which is really anxiety. But I really enjoy like old scary movies. So I like thrillers and, you know, just those older kind of scary movies. So this is kind of the time of the year where they, have all those on. And I really enjoy doing that. And so that's what I've been doing a lot of, catching up on some of my oldie but goodie like scary movies. Um,
Can you share the one that you're watching or the most recent one you rewatched?
the most recent one that I rewatched. Okay, I really like this Italian filmmaker, and one of the what's the name of this movie? One of his old movies is called Cat of Nine Tails,
Okay.
and it's like this, just like kind of what you would call like a slasher movie, like somebody who is kind of stalking, people in the community. And I like the cinematography of it. Like I like the vibe. I like the way it was shot. I like the old clothes that people are
Mm.
wearing. Like this is a movie from like the 60s, 70s, like that time, So I like the lighting that this particular filmmaker focuses on. Um, that's enough nerding out about that. Let's move right on along. Um, okay. So as we both, kind of started this particular episode off, just welcoming everybody to, the second season. We're really excited. We have some new things that we're going to be doing, partnering with some folks, and I'm really excited about that, especially just related to the topics and really continuing, these conversations just in a more holistic way. Um, as mentioned, our new season of the Reclaiming Soul Work podcast is dedicated to the practices and wisdom of unlearning for spiritual social workers and other helping professionals. We believe that there is a sacredness and a magic that happens when we make space for unlearning, and there is magic in unlearning. The type of magic that we're all excited to share more about. And again, today's topic will focus on the things we need to unlearn from our experiences in social work. Let's see. Biany always includes a disclaimer and just want to continue that practice here. We invite you to make space for curiosity, for awe, for wonder, for mad question asking as we ride this journey of unlearning together. Let's try to surrender self-judgment and focus on the lessons we've been taught. Again, as always, give yourself grace as we go on this journey with you. Um, so here's just a little rundown of how we're going to be going over this particular topic so that you all can kind of be prepared, for how we're going to tackle this conversation. So what problematic lessons or teachings have you learned from social work school that you are ready to unlearn or release? And then we'll each kind of share 2 to 3 lessons. We'll see how this goes. If you are present with us during this session. Hi, Crystal. It's great to have you. Thanks for being here with us today. Greatly appreciate you for saying hello. Yeah, so whatever kind of comes up, please definitely let us know. If you'd like to share, we're definitely open to that. Shall I hop in first, or do you want to share first, Biani?
I'm. Why don't you hop in? But I also want to just say hi, Crystal. We're so happy to have you, Crystal.
Yeah, I I just want to also share and put Crystal on the spot a little bit. Um, During our last live, I believe it was,
Yeah,
Crystal, you and then my other friend Lillian, who's here in Anchorage. Again, we just greatly appreciate you all's continued support as well as engagement. You all have just been very inspiring as well as just great sources of affirmation, validation, about a lot of the topics that we've been talking about. So again, just greatly appreciate, again, just that continued support. So let's hop on into some things. Um, During the previous live, we shared a few of the things that we've been unlearning. I think we each might have shared one thing, and I just wanted
yeah.
to continue talking about a few of those, but specifically the one that I want to introduce is choosing intersectionality.
Mm,
So, one of the kind of areas that I have reflected a lot on is the way that intersectionality has been integral in just my development, not only as a social worker, but throughout the many different hats that I wear. And, I felt like that in my social work program, there were spaces where intersectionality was like, I don't exactly remember what it was called, but it was kind of like a pillar. So I went to the University of Michigan, and one of the things that they like marketed towards new students coming in was that all of the social work syllabi had to have like these 3 to 5 pillars that were always incorporated into the lessons. And if I'm not mistaken, I know intersectionality was one of those things. But there were some classes where it was very clear, that the instructor not only incorporated the theory around intersectionality into the course, but then also had a very clear understanding and gave examples of how they use intersectionality, how we were supposed to apply it, and then the downfalls of not incorporating or the harm that could be associated with not incorporating intersectionality, into our lens. And so I also felt like, though, that there were spaces where intersectionality wasn't like clearly integrated or it wasn't really that important. And so to me, a lot of times that just communicated this choice about intersectionality, like there are conversation spaces, communities, whatever, where intersectionality was relevant, and then there were spaces where it wasn't. And even in me understanding intersectionality, right? Like, and there are places that, I had to continue, even now, right? Like, continue to strengthen my understanding about the ways that I perpetuate, white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, so on and so forth, whatever it is. Um, you have to be, the point that I'm trying to make is you have to be mindful of where your blind spots might be, or maybe that's not the right word, where you're not being mindful of intersectionality about, like where your lens around things may not be as inclusive, as your intention should be. And so, yeah, I feel like intersectionality is a conversation that or a topic that we always have to be ensuring that everybody is on the same page about, because sometimes we're not. I hope that was clear.
That that is really clear, and I really appreciate you centering us and starting us there. Um, I don't. My program never talked about intersectionality, and I'm kind of holding that like, wow, that sounds cool. But I also imagine there's two sides to that coin, right? Of the experience of being in a program where people actually talk about intersectionality, um, or how what that means applied.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting. I was thinking about spiritual practices when you were speaking, and I am wondering if like what we invite like in our podcast, like choosing intersectionality as a spiritual practice too. And that's something that we have to make space for, but it requires unlearning what we've been like indoctrinated in our programs and our training experiences. Um, and how, one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, if, especially in this season, as we're like in the fall season now and getting ready for winter, and there's a lot of invitation for releasing and shedding. Um, there's a magic to choosing intersectionality every time, even in spaces where people aren't really practicing it, because I think we get so caught up in the theory. We'll read Kimberly Crenshaw's work, we'll use we'll read her definition, and then we don't imagine what it would be like in practice, or we feel like it's hard to put it into practice. But choosing it every time is a spiritual practice, and it's one that we have to invite every time. Um, just like we have to make space for a decolonized healing every time, every day. I think choosing intersectionality is that too. So I love the invitation you offered us. And just in the interest of time, I guess I'll share kind of something that I'm in the process of, of unlearning. Um, I think the one that comes up a lot for me is like making a choice to be authentically me is something that I'm in constant practice in my work as a therapist, as a practitioner. I have to remind myself sometimes. I'm just being honest, y'all, but just reminding myself like it's okay to be me. Like I'm relational. I care about my clients. They need to know who I am sometimes. Like who am I, right? Like being authentically myself. I find that I have to constantly like be in an unlearning. Like it's okay to be me, like they need me to be me so that they can be them, right? And um I have to say, even though I've been practicing for almost 10 years, or almost not there yet, I still have to like unlearn that, Sequoia. Like I still have to be like, it's okay to be me. Don't overthink it. Oh, like let's say if I cursed or my accent came out, or I made a reference, like I used like a song as a therapeutic reference, or like anything that feels like what I wasn't taught. I have to constantly be like, it's okay. Like me being myself is really important. Like that's where the healing really happens. The same way that Sequoia invited us, y'all, to choose intersectionality, I'm also inviting us to choose ourselves, like authentically. And don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to show up, like, wearing like wearing your hoops or whatever it is that is you. Like, don't be afraid to do that. I was afraid for a long time. I would wear stuff that didn't even feel like me, but it was like neutral. And then after a while, I was like, no, I'm wearing my hoops. I'm putting my lip gloss on. My hair is going to be my hair. But it took a lot of unlearning. So yeah, that's what I'll share.
I greatly appreciate that reflection, and I think that it goes right along with that conversation that we were, offered during our live at the beginning of September. I think that we talked about professionalism a little bit during that live, and I think that that's a part of this, like, authentic expression of self, even as, a therapist, a social worker, in any kind of setting. It is that kind of walk, that balance between, what you've been taught in school, what's being modeled in these agencies, mental health settings, academia, hospitals, again, wherever you work, what's being modeled about how you're supposed to show up. And then if you have the privilege and the ability to kind of work for yourself or just be in a space where you can show up more authentically and unlearn some of those things that have been modeled, you know, what does that look like for you? I kind of parallel that to my creative process. As an artist, you are navigating what is your creative style, which ultimately boils down to, you know, what's the authentic side of the way that you want to express yourself. And I feel like even within like social work, it is about like, how are you building rapport with people? How are you creating relationships? And that value is very connected to, um, I personally would say, indigenous, Black centered, people of color centered ways of healing. Like relationship is always important, for those of us that align with that value. We really understand that what facilitates that relationship building too is, again, that ability to connect, that relatability. And so yeah, like when you say, that you mentioned like songs and things like that during therapy, or, you present yourself in a way that, again, just aligns with yourself like that reminds me of this time with my clients. I usually try to take off for 2 to 4 weeks every 3 months, with my clients. And I've had many of my clients say, wow, I'm glad that you do that because, you tell us like we need to take a break. And, I meaning my client, I see you doing that. And it's like, yeah, like I have to. Outside of the fact that I'm telling you how important it is, like I know how important it is for myself, like I'm not just telling you things like checking off a checklist for things that I'm not doing myself. I think I'm done with that.
I was just thinking about a session I had where my client showed up with like their moo, and I was so honored. Like they just had their hair wrapped, and they just showed up, and I was like, ah, such an honor. It's such an honor that they trust me in this way, and that feels big around healing, right? That you feel safe enough with somebody to do that, and it suggests, to us as practitioners that, I mean, it reminds us that the healing really does happen in the relationship. And I remember when this is my second set of locks, but I remember my first set of locks. I was in my second year field placement in a college doing college counseling, and I remember I was ready to cut my locks off, and I think I did one night. And the next day, this like coworker, this person that worked at the counseling center, was like so relieved that I cut my locks. In a way, I mean, my locks were really long, thick, long, and I remember being so like, I think it did something to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have kept them, or just the experience of, oh, now I'm professional to you, kind of thing. And now, my clients like, oh, I love your hair and I love that hairstyle, or it. I get to really be myself, and we could talk about hair and the sacredness of hair, as folks of color, as like Black, brown, indigenous, melanated folks, like hair is sacred, and we can talk about it. We can have conversations about our hair stories, right? Because that's therapeutic too. And yeah, and just remember that feeling of like, I had to unlearn that, like just kind of just be like, oh no, we're not gonna internalize this. But you're right,
Definitely.
like those professionalism I mean, they're all tools of supremacy culture,
Mm-hmm.
couched in this like, oh, this is how you're supposed to be professional.
Mm-hmm.
But they ask us to be bland, to be boring, to be
Robots.
robots. Right, basically. And we have to
Robots.
unlearn that. We have to unlearn that. We have to unleash that robot that they've like tried to stuff down our throats and bodies and mind.
Or just like this, and yes, yes, bland and bland in the sense of just like they're like we have no problems, like we have no issues, like we have it all together, like we've never had to go to a food pantry before, like we've never had to utilize mutual aid support, like we don't have families that could easily show up at our own offices for support, or that we don't navigate our own mental health issues. It's just like it's too much.
It really
And,
is.
I, again, with my clients, I tell them, like if I can't make a session that day, if I'm not feeling well, if I have a migraine, like I tell all my clients, even during like my intake, my consultations, I tell them like I have chronic migraines. There might be a time where I might have to cancel your appointment, but I just want you to know this is the kind of therapist that I am. I'm not going to sit in a therapy session with you and I have a migraine. That doesn't serve you and it definitely don't serve me. And I don't
Mm.
do that.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Well, I want to point out that you're offering us another lesson to unlearn that is weaved into what we discuss, but this lesson of like us really being like denying our needs in the service of the other, which is something we talked about on our IG live, but I think we have to emphasize, right? That's one of the foundational things we have to learn. They don't really talk to us about burnout in our trainings. They talk about self-care without no instruction, but they don't talk to us, and it's not normalized that you are going to experience burnout. I think the wish for burnout prevention is great, but the truth of it is, as a care professional, as a helping professional, you're going to experience burnout. And it is important to really share who you are up front with the people that you are holding space for and let them know, that you're human too. And you're right. Like that really resonates. Like I'm going to do you a disservice and myself if I show up to a session and I'm in pain. I'm not modeling that for you. I'm not modeling that. But there's also, I find that I have to kind of do some psychoeducation with some clients because our culture really teaches this idea that people who are care professionals or helping professionals are supposed to be self-sacrificial. And we get taught that in our trainings, we get taught that in the culture. And I'm saying this as somebody who was a former teacher. I taught in middle school. And I remember that feeling like people didn't want us to, like, if you were sick, well, can you show up? Can you try to show up anyway? Like that was in our culture too as teachers. Anybody
Hmm.
who's really in service or care professional work, like people expect us to be self-sacrificial. They expect us not to ask for a livable wage. They expect us not to take time off for ourselves. They expect us to work until we burn out. And so I appreciate what you're modeling for us. And I hope those who are watching and listening can really sit with that, like this idea, like, what would it be like to hold your pain and then hold somebody else's? Sometimes you have to hold your pain and not somebody else's. You might have to take a break. You might have to give yourself grace and be like, hey, I can't do this today. Or, yeah, it requires a little of self awareness to sort of be like, hey, telling you up front, this is who I am. This is what could happen. But this is also unlearning, y'all. Like, we have to unlearn so that we can take care of ourselves. I think that's part of burnout prevention,
Hmm.
unlearning a lot of these false messages we've been taught about what it means to care for others.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I. That's a very layered conversation. A lot of thoughts came up about burnout specifically, and just this, and I believe that this ties into the unlearning, and so I'm just going to keep this very short, so that we can stay focused, so we can stay focused. Um, but this unlearning piece too, I think, and we can talk about this more, maybe in a live or another kind of talk, is a lot of times burnout is framed in this very like individual, like you have to do something, kind of thing. But it's also this unlearning around that too, to be able to understand that this systemic, that burnout is literally built into policies and procedures, meaning like there isn't this real like understanding about leave, like taking time off, even in the culture, right? So like, yeah, you might have like these, the days off that you can take, but if you don't have a culture where people are really supportive of you taking time off, or if you can only take time off if somebody else like picks up your caseload, you're not going to take off. You're not going to take off. So I feel like, you know, oh, Crystal says here, burnout for many folks is a system issue. Yeah. Yeah. And so
And it's true when you add
mm-hmm,
also the pressure around capitalism, right? If you need the money, you can't take off. Like it's also added to, it's just another example. Like if you really need, it's like that feedback loop. You need the break, but if you take off, you can't afford to get the break. It's like it's all, you're right, it's all built into the culture.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So just to kind of tie things in, about this unlearning piece, you know, we have to look at these things from a kind of holistic and just wider perspective, you know. And again, we're using this example of burnout. It's not just this individual, you need to take time off, kind of mindset. Like that's part of it. But then again, as Crystal mentioned, it's this whole systemic kind of piece too, you know. Crystal says here, right? Do you still have to meet productivity when you get back? Yeah,
And what kind of break can you
yeah.
have if you're already that, like the loop keeps going, the loop of overworking, of hyper productivity. We don't live in a culture where rest is welcomed or celebrated. And right, it's a systemic issue. I mean, even talking about burnout, it's like the bad little B word, you know? Like it's like a buzzword online, but none of us really, I think you're right, the only angle we talk about it is individual. We
Mm-hmm.
really don't talk about it as like and we've separated things, even when there's like a movement around talking about rest. Like now the movement has been about rest, and we haven't really examined burnout or looked at it through like a political lens. So it's just really interesting. Now I'm thinking, yeah, we should totally do a live on burnout. And now I'm thinking about um, this idea of self-sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
and how that could really be damaging to our spiritual like wellness too. Our physical for sure, our emotional, mental for sure, occupational, but our spiritual wellness. Because self-sacrifice is also like a way that we have to really disconnect to ourselves. Like we have to disconnect to ourselves. There's a part of us that just we don't have room to access our own needs because we're constantly having to be there for another person.
Mm-hmm.
And for us at Reclaiming Soul Work podcast, like we really see the interconnections, and we look at spirituality through a intersectional lens. The spiritual is political, the spiritual is personal, the spiritual is collective. And you know this idea that if we self-sacrifice, especially in our programs, we've been taught, and I think this is kind of we talked about history last episode, the role of history in shaping social work policy and practice, but also this idea that if you self-sacrifice, you feel like a good person. I know people who feel like that. And it's sad on so many levels because you're doing such a disservice to your wellness, to your multidimensional wellness. If you think, and it's also connected to whiteness and supremacy, because this profession has often just catered to white women. And so it would make a white woman feel really good about themselves if they self-sacrifice in their work and they go back to their little world of perpetuating this culture. But what does it mean for us, like people like us who are doing this work with our folks, our community? And we are giving up. I mean, it's just, it feels like a cycle.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And just a larger and very nuanced conversation, because there's some cultural pieces to that. For me, identifying, as a Black queer femme, like, there's some stuff that's been socialized within me related to that self-sacrificial piece. The rewards of uh emotional labor being expected of me, and what that means to not have boundaries, when we're talking about like in the work realm. um it's a lot. It's a lot there. um and so, yeah, I think one of the reasons why this conversation is so important, you know because it makes you really understand and really take a step back, and think about, you know, what is your role? What are the things that you are supposed to be engaging in related to, again, the work environment? What are some of the things that have been kind of put on you, placed on you as your responsibility? I know the last time we talked about quiet quitting, and just taking that step back from certain responsibilities that aren't actually a part of your job title. And it can be a lot. It can be a lot to create those kind of boundaries in those settings, because again, once you start like advocating for yourself, other kind of narratives can come into play depending on what your identity is.
Right. Oh, Crystal just dropped another gem. We want to highlight that, but like boundaries, right? We're talking about boundaries, which is another lesson that we have to unlearn in our profession, because
Mhm.
we don't get to really dialogue or really be in deep conversation around the importance of boundaries. And yeah, what does it mean for us doing this work in like in movement spaces and in our community spaces, and what does it mean to set boundaries? It's really complicated.
It is. It is. Especially, I know that we're talking about this in the sense of like, again, community and movement work, but even, within our family roles and family responsibilities, having those boundaries and self-sacrifice, like all of that, the way that that is the foundation for things absolutely plays out in the work environment. So when you think about like what's your role in your family, how do those things then translate to how you see value in yourself even in the workplace? you know um oh, I could go on and on about that now.
Well, we talked about boundaries, something that we have to unlearn, the wish to set boundaries, burnout, self-sacrifice, um, intersectionality, like choosing intersectionality, like all these really big themes that we believe are like daily practices for you to invite, like just
Mhm.
really being really mindful. So I'll repeat it again. We talked about boundaries, burnout, self-sacrifice as caring and help professionals, and choosing intersectionality. Um, and y'all, we know this is just kind of an opening conversation, right? Because we'd love to hear from you. Like, let us know in the comments if you're watching this after, like when it's recorded, like watch the playback. let us know some of the things that you're unlearning on your journey. We'd love to hear from you.
Mhm.
Um, and, these are conversations that hold the nuance too. So we know that this is practice. So just be kind to yourselves. Like, this is really a practice. Um, and if you wanted to share like a main takeaway that you had, or if there's anything else that's coming up.
Yeah, I'll just share, one of the main takeaways for me with this conversation is that, we talked about burnout being systemic, and I want to affirm and validate for anybody that's listening to this, that a lot of these unlearning practices that Biany and I have shared, and others that, have been supporting and engaging in the work, there's so many similarities,
Mm,
like even though we have our own experiences related to these themes, it's really interesting that it's all relatable,
mm,
and so that then points out how systemic a
right.
lot of this is, and systemic within, or maybe institutionalized, related to the social work profession.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're all on this journey together, as we mentioned, at the top of the hour. Um, it's a process. Many of us have had social work mentors and people that we, supervisors and things like that, people that we look up to and, agree with their values and then the way that they engage with people. And we model a lot of those things. Many of us are in those roles now, and so I think another main takeaway that I'll just share too is, what are you modeling, for
Mm,
folks who might be looking at you, you know, as a social work professional, leader, spiritual social worker, like whatever resonates for you, whatever kind of title you have, what are some of the things that you might be modeling for others that are looking to you, either directly or indirectly.
yeah. I think another takeaway that's resonating for me is like, I wonder if when we make space, right, when we give ourselves permission to enter the unlearning journey, and if we see that as like sort of a practice, whether that's a spiritual practice or just a ritual, something that you can do daily, I think there's so much growth that can be had when we make space for like us being authentically ourselves, because then we can really make space for like boundary setting, being like really careful and mindful about what our needs are, holding that we are worthy of having needs and expressing that. Kind of like what Sequoia mentioned around, hey, like, this is who I am. And I want you to know that. Like, this is what I navigate as a human, right? And there will be times that I will not be there for you. But you're even modeling there. That's a takeaway for me. You're modeling self care, you're modeling collective care by doing that. And, we really want to encourage you. This is why this season is about unlearning, because if you invite this as a practice in your life, it can really change for you and the folks that you serve. Like, this is
Mhm.
about collective, this is about really collective care and collective, um, yeah, like just the practice of like, if we can do it for ourselves, we can do it in community. And so that's really resonating for me around like this idea of us being authentic and then being able to show up authentically to the folks we hold space for. Um, yeah, that's just like really resonant for me. And I'm really grateful that for those who are here with us live, shout out to Crystal. And I'm really sitting with what you shared, Sequoia. I'm learning. There's things that I'm taking away from today that I
Mhm.
want to apply in my work too.
Mhm. I think that that's such just an important, like, I'm grateful for your reflection too about that, because I think that is such an important um kind of highlight for this framework of, unlearning, relearning, learning. Um, Even for like, I think about some of the work that I've done, with BIPOC, QT BIPOC social workers. But then it's also very important, even for like anti-racist work as well.
Mm.
If you're in this mindset of what am I unlearning? And if you understand that as something that's constant, a value that is constant, that you are never in a phase of professional, even like your life walk where you shouldn't be unlearning something. I think that that's a really good like way to check yourself, you know, about the work that you're doing.
Yes.
I just needed to sit with that a minute. That was a really good reflection there, Biani. That was a
I'm
really
sitting with
good
that
one.
too. And for those who are like tarot lovers or enthusiasts, it's kind of giving me like the Fool vibe, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um like I think the Fool energy is like you go in with the idea that you don't know and you're constantly like learning, and then you're not attached to what you learned. Like there's, and y'all, this framework that Sequoia mentioned, is a framework that we talked about in the first season. So if you are new to our podcast, welcome, and check out I think it was like episode 3, but you can check out the whole first season too,
Okay.
to learn our framework. But yeah, like this unlearning framework, I feel like it's a spiritual tool. It's a like psycho spiritual tool, socio political tool. Like it really just depends, but I think it really could resonate for a lot of practitioners.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this idea that we don't know everything. You know, we actually, I believe I know nothing. I'm always learning, especially when I'm supporting clients. Like there's so
Mm-hmm.
much that I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. They are the
Mm-hmm.
expert. Um, and this is true. We have to constantly be like calling ourselves in and challenging things that we believe to be true, or that we think things are supposed to look a certain way. That's often an invitation for unlearning. When we are getting caught up in like it's supposed to be this way, then we have to come back and be like, oh, wait, hold on. What did I learn about social work, right? That it's supposed to be this way. Where did I learn that? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for
Seriously.
the person I'm holding space for? We're inviting invitation for reflection. Like if you think you know something, that is where the unlearning journey begins, my friend.
And it's such a weird flex to me,
Mm,
like especially in
talk
like the
about it.
social work realm, because if you like, we've all had to take some level of human behavior, and at the foundation of human behavior is constantly changing and evolving. And so if human behavior is constantly changing and evolving, how can you feel like anything is supposed to be anything? It can't be. It literally cannot.
I'm gonna sip my tea because that was straight up tea. Exactly. It can't be
It,
that.
it it can. It literally can. If we are constantly evolving and changing, how is anything like this static, very like, you know, rigid, I know everything? How can you?
Yes, tell a friend, tell a friend. I mean, I think it's also interesting. I said this before. I don't know. Yes, it was the last episode about why are we called social workers. I'll do my work, y'all. But if any of y'all know in the comments, let us know. Maybe you know
That's
the
so
history about
interesting to me.
what the term social workers. I think our work is highly relational, yet we're being taught not to be in relationship. It's just the irony of it. But yes, absolutely. What does it mean to think that you know? I mean, there's so much we don't know. We always have to be in relationship to that. So those are
That was
those are
good.
some takeaways that we have. If
Mm-hmm.
y'all have some
Mm-hmm.
takeaways from today's episode 8, the things we've unlearned in social work, please let us know in the comments. We would love to hear from you. And if this inspires some inquiry around future topics that you'd like us to cover, let us know. If you want us to
Mm-hmm.
do a topic on burnout or boundary setting, or some of the things we mentioned today about like being authentic, how to show up with your like the folks you're serving and supporting, let us know in the comments too. We would love to hear from you. We care about what you need. So if there's things you'd like us to cover, let us know. Um, Yeah, so I'll end there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We'll be back again for a live stream on October the 10th. We'll offer tips for our social work and counseling students getting ready for their first job after graduate school. And so, yeah, we'll see you all here back again live on YouTube on October 10th, 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern.
Yes, y'all. Thanks again for being in community with us today and supporting a heart centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, identity, and ancestral connections through the lens of tarot, divination, mysticism, mental health, and everything in between, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. We'd love to stay connected and build this spirituality and healing community. So if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our YouTube page at Reclaiming Soul Work Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Reclaiming Soul Work. Once you subscribe to the YouTube channel, though, you can set a reminder for notifications when we release new episodes. And if you go to our website, you can sign up on the landing page as well. So you have two options. And then be sure to sign up for our free newsletter, our monthly-ish first quarter new moon. And that one comes out a week after the new moon. So if you sign up this week, you'll get it next week in your inbox. Y'all, it was such a pleasure being with you
This was
here
great.
today.
Hmm.
Shout out to those who were live again. Shout out to Crystal. Shout out to those who
Hmm.
are watching the playback. Thank you for supporting us. We are so excited to
Hmm.
have you here.
Hmm.
Welcome to your unlearning journey. And we'll see you on October 10th.
Grateful.